They said I was overreacting. Then I caught my uncle trying to forge my signature at the lawyer's office. 1 week later, I walked into the will reading with documents that made everyone go silent. My grandfather owned a small printing business in the industrial part of town. Nothing fancy, just offset presses and commercial jobs, but it kept 3 generations fed and comfortable. When he got sick, everyone suddenly became very concerned grandsons. Aunts who hadn't visited in years were bringing casseroles in disposable containers. My uncle started sleeping in the guest room to help out, which seemed noble at first. I was there every morning before work. 6 a.m. arrivals to help him shower because he refused a nurse. Organizing his 17 different medications into those weekly pill containers. Listening to the same stories about the Korean War and how he started the business with 200 borrowed dollars. My cousin would show up twice a month with grocery store flowers, stay for 20 minutes, and take selfies with him for Facebook. Her captions were always about family legacy and unconditional love. 3 days before he died, Grandpa asked me to stay after everyone left. He was lucid that day, sharp in a way he hadn't been for weeks. Said he wanted me to have the business, that I'd earned it through all those early mornings and late nights when everyone else was too busy. I told him we could talk about it later, that he should rest. He grabbed my hand hard, his grip still surprisingly strong. No, now, promise me you'll fight for it. They'll try to take it, I promised, though I didn't fully understand what he meant. At the funeral, my uncle gave this tearful speech about family legacy and staying united. How Grandpa would want us all to stick together through the hard times. Everyone was nodding and crying into their programs. I stood there holding the folded flag from his casket, feeling oddly disconnected from the performance happening around me. 2 weeks later, the lawyer called. There was a problem with the will. Someone had submitted an amended version dated 1 day before Grandpa died. This new version left everything to my uncle, including the business, the property, and Grandpa's personal accounts. My handwriting was on the witness line. I stared at my phone after hanging up. I'd been with Grandpa that entire last day. He could barely hold a pen, let alone think about legal documents. I drove to the lawyer's office immediately. My uncle was already in the parking lot when I arrived, leaning against his truck with his arms crossed. He smiled that same smile from the funeral. But Grandpa changed his mind at the end. You understand, right? Sometimes the oldest son should carry the legacy forward. I walked past him into the building without responding. The lawyer showed me the document. My signature looked perfect, almost too perfect, like someone had traced it carefully instead of signing. Naturally, the date was wrong too. I pulled out my phone and showed him the text my grandfather sent me the morning he died, time-stamped and saved. It said simply, "Don't let them take what's yours." I kept my promise. Then I handed over the security footage. 6 months earlier, when things started feeling off, when my uncle's visits became more frequent and his questions about the business became more specific, I'd quietly installed cameras in Grandpa's house, just the common areas, nothing invasive. I told myself it was for his safety. The footage showed my uncle at Grandpa's desk at 3 in the morning, 2 days before Grandpa died, practicing my signature on scrap paper over and over, getting the loops and slants just right, then carefully, methodically, filling in the witness line on an official-looking document. The lawyer's face went pale as he watched. He asked if he could keep the footage. I'd already backed it up in 5 different places. The will reading was scheduled for that Friday morning at 10. My whole family showed up dressed like they were attending a corporate merger. My uncle walked in looking like he'd already won, his lawyer trailing behind with a heavy briefcase. My aunt was texting someone, probably about remodeling plans for the house she thought she'd be moving into. My cousin sat in the back row scrolling through her phone. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Before we begin the formal reading, there's been a development regarding document authenticity that the court needs to address. He turned his laptop around so everyone could see the screen. He hit play on the footage. The room went completely silent as my uncle's hand filled the frame, carefully tracing my signature on scrap paper, over and over, practicing the curves. Then the final shot, him forging the witness line on the amended will, his face clearly visible in the desk lamp's light. My uncle stood up so fast his chair fell backward and clattered against the wall. That's edited. That's clearly doctored footage. This is a setup. The lawyer pulled out a notarized statement from a handwriting expert who'd analyzed both signatures, then the police report I'd filed that morning, and finally announced in a flat, professional voice that the original will stood, and I was the sole inheritor of the business, property, and all associated assets. My uncle grabbed his coat and left without looking at anyone.